Hi, everyone. My guest today is Niklas Adalberth. He is the founder of Noshkan Foundation. And I'm really, really honored that Niklas is participating in our series of conversations because I really look up to him. I think he's further on his journey in life even, but in terms of philanthropy and what he's doing in Sweden and Scandinavia is really quite inspirational for me personally, but also for the José Neves Foundation. So we've been learning a lot with him and with his team lately, and I really appreciate Niklas, you making the time. I know you're very busy. So to start with, tell us about your personal story. So how did you start in philanthropy, and what makes you tick? What are your big passions, and what's the Noshkan Foundation mission?
Yes, sure. So I guess perhaps we should go all the way back to when I was lucky to co-found a payment company in Stockholm called Klarna. We handle e-commerce payments for different companies such as Farfetched and other great e-commerce companies. And my idea back then was that I believed that it was a one-to-one correlation with happiness and the amount of zeros you had on your bank account. But about 7 years into Klarna, I was able to sell off my first portion of shares. It was about $10 million. So I went from being in debt into being sort of financially independent. And I decided to celebrate this for 3 days in Las Vegas on our way to a conference in San Francisco. And it was very spontaneous. I just went there by myself because there was no other time to invite any friends. And, I went with the business class for the first time. You go to the left instead of the right. You get a glass of champagne instead of being yelled at. And I checked into this big panorama suite in Las Vegas, living the dream, really, that I looked so much forward to all these hardworking years at Klarna. But then going out for dinner and eating all these shellfish that I actually didn't like that much and drinking wine that I couldn't pronounce, I started to realize that I couldn't really feel any difference to this wine to anything else, to my cheap bottles back home. And this big panorama suite just felt empty. And I looked at all of these branded, pathetic clothing bags that I purchased like crazy, and I just felt totally meaningless. And I broke down in that hotel room in Las Vegas, realizing that this was just a myth. It is no correlation up to a certain point with money and happiness. And from that day, it felt no longer meaningful to chase the next financial goal. So that was a big, pivotal moment for me, I guess.
That's incredible. That's an incredible story. So sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and so I started to question that, okay, what is a happy life then? And most of the research pointed in the same direction, that a happy life is a meaningful life. And I started to look at what I was doing, and once again, no correlation with money and happiness from a certain point. And what we do at Klarna is great. We help e-commerce companies with their payments, but we also have enable people to pay in installments, so you can pay a 12th of the amount. And I was thinking that, is this really what the world needs? Consumer credit shopping when the world is sort of, when you need 4 times the amount of space and resources to cover our consumption that we have in Sweden today. So I started to figure out that, okay, am I really here part of the solution, or am I part of the problem? And having all of this luck in life, being born in Sweden, lovely parents, and having the success with Klarna, having all of that luck, and still doesn't be 100% sure that if I was part of the problem or part of the solution, that made me eventually quit after 10 years at Klarna, and instead try to do something where I could really look in my mirror and say that I'm at least trying to be part of the solution here. And that was 4 years ago. And I decided to donate half of my wealth into a foundation then called Norsken Foundation. Means Northern Light in Swedish. It's a horrible international name, I guess. And the idea is really to try to do what I know a little bit about, which is technology and entrepreneurship, but not to use that to make maximum money for myself, but rather to use that to solve real societal and planetarian problems. So what we do essentially is that we try to build an ecosystem for impact entrepreneurship, where you use your business models to actually tackle problems. So for every revenue you get 1 unit of impact as well. One example could be Northvolt, which is building the greenest battery for electrical vehicles in the world. Another one could be a food saving app called Karma, in which you could save food through an app that otherwise would have been gone to waste by the restaurant owners. So solutions like that, where you have the ability to make money as an entrepreneur, but you're also solving and tackling a societal problem while you're doing it.
And that makes me think of our first conversation, and how you talked about effective altruism, which I know is very close to your heart, and how do we do altruism in a effective way, but also in a sustainable way, in a way that doesn't blow all your money in 6 months and the world is still in the same place. How can you make this circular in a way, right? And how do you see effective altruism playing a part in what you do?
Yes, right. So it took me some time before I stumbled upon that movement or philosophy, and it really helped me sort out how I should prioritize my time and resources. And basically, just as you said, what effective altruism means is that you should use your dollar to the highest return on investment from an impact perspective. So for example, I don't know the English terminology here, but to train a dog that helps blind people cost about $30,000. For the same amount of money, you could actually treat a couple of hundred people in exotic geographies from blindness. So if you only have $30,000, should you then finance a dog that leads blind, or should you actually help 200-300 people? And that answer is quite obvious. And with the same within the same philosophy, it also says that you should use your own skills to do maximum impact. So if you're a really good hedge fund manager, maybe you should continue to be a hedge fund manager and donate part of those proceeds instead of sitting yourself at a soup kitchen handing out food. That would not be efficient. And then for me, that means that I should probably use entrepreneurship and technology to do something meaningful instead of doing something that I have no clue about.
That's great, and that really inspired me. Although without knowing, the mission of the foundation that we launched in Portugal, the José Neves Foundation, which is to enable Portugal to be a knowledge society, and the focus in Portugal and the focus in knowledge, and the focus also in digital tools, because everything we do in our foundation is digital. We don't have a building. We don't have a beautiful building where we have a digital platform. The income share agreements we launch in a fully 100% digital platform. Bright the Future is a digital platform, and when we talked about this, it helped me structure things and Carlos and the team even further, because this is what we know how to do. We love our country, and we think our country can benefit from philanthropy more than other countries, because in Southern Europe, sadly, there is no tradition, not in Portugal, not in Spain, not in Italy. There's very few foundations, very few philanthropy going on. But on the other hand, where is it that we can make the most impact? Being digital entrepreneurs, myself, Carlos, and Antonio, the three founders. So that really helped us, siphon, what we should come through, what we should do and should maybe not do, so that we create most impact. And also we collaborate with our institutions, with the government and with universities and our other, non-profit, not-for-profit organizations where we should do things where we can have the most impact and let the space for others to do what they're doing well. And so this concept of return on investment, not just in the dollars, but in the time, because time is an absolutely precious resource, right? And focus and energy. So for us, it was, an eye-opener. So thank you for sharing. So going to another topic, which you touched on already, which is digital, and you as a digital entrepreneur, knowing the power of digital to change industries, to change the way people do things. And Klarna is an amazing European startup that is changing the way people shop and e-commerce businesses interact with their customers at a global scale. So having been through that experience and now at the NOSC Foundation, how do you see the role of digital? Digital, can be, as a tool that humans have invented, can be used for good and for evil. And but how do you see digital being a force for good in the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess the short answer is I don't really know. I can just sit here and look 2020 that the technology in general could, to your point, be really, really good for human prosperity, but it's also like the real core to all the problems we're seeing as well. I mean, just going back 1,000 years ago, a person could catch one fish at a time with that technology or non-technology at that time. But today we have 2 kilometers of fish trawlers just swiping up everything from the ocean. And with the ultra competitiveness we have today, humans are using technology just to store as much resources and the surplus as possible. And no one is really paying for those negative externalities. So it's technology is really an exponential negative factor as a whole, I would say. And then when it comes to the digital technology, I don't think we have seen that many impressive solutions today. I mean, we see a lot of addictive games or social communities that is just going to kidnap our brain, and people are feeling worse than ever in history. So what we are trying to do, at least, is try to put some spotlight on the good solutions and try to inform as many people as possible that all businesses have negative externalities and positive externalities. Let's make sure that it's much more into the positive externalities and try to take responsibility of the negative externalities that are creating in all businesses.
Absolutely, and it's incredible how you use the word technology kidnapping our brains, and I think that is a very strong image, but it is a true image. If you think the amount of hours all of us spend looking at screens, and the amount of media and social media and gaming and information we consume, information sometimes of very, very poor quality that doesn't really add anything to anyone. And I always talk to my children. I have 4 kids, ages 17 to 22, and I always tell them about the perils of social media, because social media created digital identities for human beings, and human beings have a fair share of problems with identity. we live perhaps all our lives without really knowing who we are and what we are and what is the purpose and what is the meaning of us being here. And that is key to spirituality, isn't it? To answering the deep question of who and what we are. And it's key to human relationships when we interact with other people. What is our role? How can we help others? Where are our boundaries and where are others' boundaries? So this this central human experience. In the center of human experience, there is always this sense of identity. And most people don't realize that this is absolutely key to how our brains work. Our brains need a center, right? And that center is our identity. And you can call it ego if you're a psychoanalyst or a psychologist, or you can call it some other thing. But what digital has created, and I think this is the most toxic contribution of digital ever, is another confusion, which we already were completely confused as human beings for thousands and thousands of years, was create another confusion, which is multiple digital identities, one in Twitter, one in Facebook, one in Instagram, blah, 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 blah. And the kids don't really know what they're playing with, because this is very powerful. You know, you're playing with your own sense of worthiness. And we all grow up with a sense of lack of worth, that we're not worthy of the good things that happen to us, and maybe we're to blame for the not so good things that happen to us. And when you layer on top this garbage, it just makes, you know, so much more difficult for youngsters to sort out their true identities, which takes a lifetime. And going into lifetime, that makes me think of a project that caught our attention at the José Neves Foundation, that you are a founder of, which is called 29K. For all of those that are watching us, please check it out. It's 29k.org, I think, the website. But the most interesting thing is actually the app. So you can find it on the iOS App Store. I don't know about Android. And it's called 29K because Niklas explained to me that we have on average 29,000 days in our human lives. And this is really, on one hand, you can see it as a journey, a 29,000 day journey. And on the other, to me, what it means is like live every day, right? Because there is a precious resource that we have. And to me, it caught my eye because it's such an amazing example of how digital, and in particular communication between human beings in a digital environment, which is usually so toxic, right? So aggressive and so, you know, ego driven. You know, how we can use the flip side of the coin, the other side of digital communication between groups of people. And communication with therapists, communication with people who can inspire and who can guide other human beings in their moments of difficulty. How digital can actually be used in a revolutionary way that can amplify. And I love your mission to be as good or better than therapy. For 0.1% of the cost, allowing, you know, all of us to have access to the benefits of science-led therapy for mental well-being. So, with that, clunky introduction to 29K, I'd like to pass to you. You're the founder. It's your brainchild and Eric's. So, what is it, and what are the results so far, and what are your plans for the future with 29K?
Right. No, I think you explained it better than I will do now, I guess. As we talked about before, when I crashed in that hotel room, when the myth sort of exploded, that is getting all these external stuff, things, doesn't do anything to happiness. And the realization that I could buy anything, but I don't feel a thing about it, it's just so meaningless. Then I needed to find meaning again. And when I did that, or in order to do that, I was getting a lot of help from therapy, and going to different retreats and explore ego development. And I have a big ego, so there was a lot to explore and a lot of therapy needed.
We all have egos. We all have egos. We all have egos, and we'd better assume they're big, because if we don't, that's probably a sign of a big ego.
Exactly. And I think also that is correlated to the more financial success you had, probably the more ego you have. At least you would get big egos because you think you did something really good that is worth appreciation from the outside, and then the ego grows even more, and then you turn narcissistic almost. So I got a lot of help from therapy, but the problem is that each session cost in Sweden about $100 for 45 minutes. And it's really doesn't really scale really well to a cheap cost. So the idea with 29k.org is to enable all of these different psychological tools that a lot of researchers in psychology knows really well, and it has a really good scientific evidence, but they're not available to anyone. You could look them out online if you read like a 12-page PDF that no one will ever read. So instead we put these exercises into this app that anyone can download for free. And they are much more interactive and much more fun to do. And in the end of each exercise, you do a sharing with the other peers around a specific topic, such as stress or mental resilience or deep relations. And if you go through this program in this app, you actually develop as a human, and you could really get help with your mental challenges. And you don't need to be mentally ill or anything, rather the opposite. It's a good thing, at least for me, to go through these exercises and feel that I'm growing as a person and a better understanding of myself and feel much, much better. So that's what we're trying to do, to have this app so anyone can get help from different mental challenges.
And what I really love about 29K is the fact that there's a lot of research from Harvard, from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, from Oxford, and also that every time we interact with the app, we're contributing to research, because the data, which is very difficult to collect on a one-to-one, human-to-human therapy session, the data can be shared, obviously with people's permission, with these psychologists, researchers, to help improve not only the program, the 29K program, but also programs that happen in other platforms. So there's this kind of externalities that the more people you get in 29K, the more the researchers know how good these tools are and what aspects are they helping with. And that helps 29K improve, but it also helps, psychologists and psychotherapists, neurologists, all around the world learn more about how the human mind really works. And I spoke in my launch event with Antonio Huerta Osorio. He's the CEO of Lloyd's Bank, which is one of the largest financial institution in the UK and one of the largest in the world. And he went through a burnout. So, he was experiencing insomnia, and he very publicly, it was famous, it was in all newspapers, he asked for which ended up in 6 weeks, but could have been longer, leave as a public company, financial sector CEO, to really work on what was going on with him. And then he shared in a very poignant way his experiences. So to your point, this is not about people that are mentally ill. This is about prevention, right? So how can we prevent people from aggravating, either insomnia or anxiety or early depression? How we can catch it early and actually help people, because this is our minds and psyches. You can use the analogy of the body, right? You can treat yourself well, eat well, have a good diet, exercise, and avoid 80% of diseases, or you can do nothing about it and then go straight to the hospital and have a ton of drugs injected in you, right? So it's the psyche. The psyche is not very different. You either take care of it daily, or you may end up, having to have medication. There's nothing wrong with medication, but it's certainly very, very powerful, and especially in countries such as Portugal, there's still a huge stigma around mental health and mental well-being. And how do you see it in the current pandemic? One of my concerns, even as vaccines hopefully roll out around the world, and we see, past this disease, hopefully sooner rather than later. Certainly, we all hope mid to end this year, the world will start to feel more like a normal, like what used to feel like 1 year ago. How do you see the consequences of the pandemic in mental health? And do you agree, because that's a concern I have, I would love to be wrong, that even after, the pandemic is controlled, those traumas and those wounds will still be there, right? People will still have to, they went through quite a traumatic process, be it their own health or their relatives, or even job security, financial security, or even being constrained to a small flat with a large family, sometimes through months and months and months, and people are generally not equipped, right, with tools, psychological tools that can help them. And how do you see this? Is there a psychological pandemic besides a biological pandemic, in your view?
Yes, it's been studies already from China and in Sweden, I know, and the numbers are just horrific. And to me, this is, I don't know the subject too well, I'm not a scientist, but the numbers here looks like there will be much worse than the pandemic itself. I mean, I can't even imagine how many wives and children have been beaten up by their husbands and in the family, and the suicide rates going up. And no, I think it's just horrible. And we have launched a program at 29K, which is Coping with Crisis, it's named, and to help mitigate some of this, but it's going to be awful, I think. And to your point, not everything will be solved when the pandemic and everything goes back to normal, because then you have these traumas and wounds that will really need professional help to heal, I think.
Certainly, and we're very inspired by what you're doing in Sweden. I know you started also working with the Swedish government and making 29K available to all the population, the public sector workers, and you're working with other institutions as well. And I really applaud, and we are really humbled by your incredible effort in helping the communities, particularly in this moment of crisis, with a specific program to address these issues. So we're looking forward to continue the conversation with the Notch Foundation and 29K, see if we can do something together. And meanwhile, thank you again, Niklas. Very, very inspiring, as I knew it would be. I hope everyone got as much out of this as I did. Yet again, every time we speak, I learn so much. And speak to you soon. And congratulations again.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, Niklas.